Hey book lovers, my name is Em and I want to talk about books. And cats. Welcome back, book lovers. I want to say a quick thank you to the listeners who have been sending me cute cat pictures. It's really brightened my day. I mean, you can't help but feel just a little happier after looking at cute pictures of cats. So I have had a lifelong struggle with sleep. And lately, I have actually made some changes that have improved my sleep immensely. I've been getting a full night of solid sleep for the last 5 nights, and I feel incredible. So how does this relate to books? I have actually managed, for the first time ever, to create a pre-sleep routine. This is something that I know a lot of people probably already do, but it has never worked for me before. And my pre-sleep routine includes reading. Again, I know tons of people read before bed and it's not anything new. It's no big revelation, but I used to do it as a kid. And I read to my kids before bed for years, but it's been a really long time since I could read before bed and then fall soundly asleep. It's a shift that I've wanted to happen, but I thought it was impossible for a long time. Because reading doesn't always make me fall asleep. I read the whole time I had insomnia too, and it was hit or miss whether or not it would actually help me fall asleep. Movies worked for a while, but books usually kept me awake because I would get too involved in the story. I think it made my brain work too hard. So yeah, I'm reading before bed and getting good sleep, which is great. I also am trying to pace myself and read more calmly. Every time I have a good book, I just want to inhale it. I want to do nothing but just read until it's done. But now I'm trying to savor them, take breaks, let it kind of digest a little and then come back to it. And it's also helping with me not staying up all night to finish an entire book. So far so good. I think when I was younger, it didn't matter as much if I inhaled the book because I was able to go back and reread it because I didn't have access to as many books back then. Now there are so many books to be read and I just don't have the time to reread anything, which may benefit you book lovers. On my Patreon, I will be giving away some of the books that I've already talked about on the podcast. Speaking of my Patreon, it is a work in progress. Currently, there's only one thing on there, but more is coming very soon. I should have something new up this weekend. So if you want to be an early supporter, the link is patreon.com/booksandcatspod. So that's books, the letter N, cats, pod. The link's also in the show notes. There are 3 different levels of support if you want to help me keep the podcast growing, which it does seem to be, so welcome if you're a new listener. Of course, I also understand that things are difficult for people right now, and if you have other things to worry about, feel free to just continue listening for free. I really just want to talk about books. So let's get to that part. This week's book is The Lost Apothecary by Sarah Penner. So I chose this book entirely based on the gorgeous cover. Sometimes it is okay to judge a book by its cover. This one was a definite win. The Lost Apothecary is a story of 3 women, and many other women, but this is told from the perspectives of Nella, who is an apothecary in the late 1800s, Eliza, a young girl who comes to assist her briefly, and Caroline, who is a woman in modern times who is feeling very lost and is on the verge of change. So at first I wasn't sure how I felt about the timeline switching. Normally that kind of thing doesn't bother me, but with 2 of the characters in the same time period, and it also being a time period that's always been one that I find one of the most fascinating, it was kind of jarring when I would get to the modern chapter because we'd have 2 chapters in the 1800s and then we'd jump to, modern day. There was also a bit of a conflict in the storylines in the beginning. An apothecary in the 1800s that deals poison to women to kill their abusive or unfaithful spouses is so my kind of story. And Eliza added an extra layer to that storyline, which included a little magic, which again is one of my favorites. In contrast, Caroline's story seemed very basic. A woman alone on an anniversary trip because she just discovered that her husband was having an affair, and now the guy is following her to the UK to try to patch things up. So in the beginning, I was not completely sold on her story. It just didn't catch me the same way. But that being said, it all comes together beautifully. And the stories end up somewhat paralleling each other. Caroline is basic in the beginning of the book because she's given up everything she's cared about for the life that she was supposed to have. The husband, the job, the trying for a baby. And she's just beginning to realize it and find herself again. And like Nella, she meets another woman who helps her grow. Nella is a haunted woman. Her mother dealt only in medicinal herbs for women and never poisons. But Nella has been scorned and it turned her. Now she helps other vengeful women take care of problematic husbands in a way that seems natural and doesn't raise any suspicions. By the time Eliza enters her storeroom, Nella is crippled with her misdeeds and the weight of all the deaths that she has caused. She feels a foreboding when the girl shows up on an errand for her mistress. The Lost Apothecary is the story of 3 women, but it is also about the history of women and the importance of friendship and helping each other. And also the importance of keeping yourself, your inner spark, alive, and feeding your own interests as well as the interests of others. And it's about forgiveness of others and yourself. It's really beautiful, just like the cover. And once you've read the book, the cover has a lot more meaning. This is just a stunning read, and I absolutely loved it. I think this one will definitely be part of a giveaway on my Patreon. It was just so good. I highly recommend it. And now we're going to take a quick break. Hi, book lovers. So I wanted to talk briefly about Prismatext. I'm really enjoying these books so much. I've been working on learning German for almost a year now, and it really helps me to read the words in a story format. Prismatext has some awesome book bundles, such as the Spooky Scary Monster Bundle, which has 4 classic monster novels. Or there's also the Roses Are Red Romantic Bundle with 4 of the best classic romances. I actually just got one of them, A Room with a View by E.M. Forster. Oh hey, we have the same initials. It was the only one out of the Roses Are Red bundle that I hadn't already read. If you're currently learning a new language, use the link in the show notes and check out all of the great books that Prismatext has to offer. And you can use the code BOOKSANDCATS for 30% off. That's books, the letter N, cats. Read the classics while learning something new with Prismatext. Welcome back, book lovers. So it is finally spring and everything is coming back to life. There's been turkeys in the field behind our house, and my favorite woodpecker is back, which made me really happy. It also means that the flies are coming back, which I don't love, but my cat Sassers definitely does. She's young and very springy. She jumps higher than any cat I have ever had. The flies hang out by a glass door that we have, and she will jump to the very top of it, just over and over until she finally catches the fly. She is so persistent. I really love how unique every cat is. They all have such different personalities, but I also love how interesting cats are on the whole. So I found some more cat facts. I'm kind of amazed at how many different lists there are. It's a good thing cats are fascinating. And speaking of, here are 10 fascinating facts about cats from Purina.com. So in terms of development, the first year of a cat's life is equal to the first 15 years of a human life. After its second year, a cat is 25 in human years. And after that, each year of a cat's life is equal to about 7 human years. I haven't done the math to figure out how old my cats are, but I will do that in a future episode. I'm curious. Also, cats can rotate their ears 180 degrees. That's pretty cool. I love watching my cats move their ears around. It's so funny. The hearing of an average cat is at least 5 times keener than that of a human adult. In the largest cat breed, the average male weighs approximately 20 pounds, which is about what my biggest cat weighs. He's a big guy. Domestic cats spend about 70% of the day sleeping and 15% of the day grooming, which explains the 20-pound house cat. A cat cannot see directly under its nose. Most cats have no eyelashes. Cats have 5 toes on each front paw, but only 4 on the back ones, although it's not uncommon for cats to have extra toes. The cat with the most toes known had 32, 8 on each paw. Can you imagine? I love cats with extra toes. Okay, next fact. Some believe that if you dream about a white cat, good luck will follow. I used to have a white cat. I always felt like he was special. And finally, one I already knew. Meows are not innate cat language. They developed them to communicate with humans, which I think is so cool. My cats are very vocal. They have a lot to say. So to wrap up this episode, I picked a quote of the week that was about cats. I was looking for something just fun, and I found one by a cat expert, Jim Davis, the cartoonist for Garfield. And his quote is, "Way down deep, we're all motivated by the same urges. Cats have the courage to live by them." I like that, because honestly, I always think like house cats just have the life, just lay in the sun, sleep, eat. Sounds good to me. I'm kind of a house cat of a human being. Anyway, that is the end of this episode, book lovers. Thank you so much for listening. If you stick around after the music, you can listen to chapter 13 of my weekly writing project, Heart of the Storm. It's starting to get really good. I'm still really happy with it, and I've kind of gotten into a writing rhythm, which is really nice, so I'm able to actually do a chapter a week. So far, so good. Yeah, it's going good. So stick around and check it out. And like I said, if you want to support the podcast, go to patreon.com/booksandcatspod. Every little bit helps, and it is so appreciated. And keep sending me cute cat pictures, any book recommendations you may have. I want to hear it all. And I've got some fun stuff coming up in the near future that I'm really excited about, so stay tuned for that too. Thank you so much for listening, and until next time, keep reading. Hey book lovers, thanks for sticking around to listen to Heart of the Storm. So now, check out chapter 13. Francie was twisting a lock of her long rainbow-sheened hair around one finger and tapping her foot impatiently. Somewhere near the high ceilings of the great hall, a dove cooed softly. Francie smirked at the sound and snapped her fingers. The bird fell to the ground like a brick. She sighed and crossed the cold stone floor. She scooped up the bird. It was a young, skinny one, not enough meat to make it worth the effort. Francie wrinkled her nose and threw the bird's lifeless body as hard as she could at the wall. There was a satisfying crack, and it left a small smear of blood on the polished stone. She kicked it into the shadows and returned to her place near the window. From the heights of the palace, she could see almost all of the valley. Only one corner was hidden from view. The road curved away and dipped out of sight as the land sloped down to the river. The hidden corner was best left unseen. Francie wished she'd known that sooner. Now a plume of darkness was billowing from the unseen place by the bridge. It collected into thick storm clouds that had begun to reach out toward the valley. Soon the sky would darken, perhaps permanently, and once the clouds descended into the valley, very few would survive. Francie placed her hand on the glass and tried to see beyond the limits of geography. To see the place that her aunt had kept hidden from her. To see death and stare it in the face. There was very little that Francie feared, and the end of her physical vessel was not on that list. With a swift movement, the girl made a fist and punched it through the glass. It shattered, and tiny bits rained down on her and got caught in her thick, multi-hued curls. The crash of glass echoed through the great hall. Francie examined the blood trickling from the many small cuts on her fingers and running down her arm in dozens of bright red trails. Under her gaze, the blood changed directions, moving back up her arm. When the blood was gone, the wounds healed up. Her skin was once again pristine. There was a loud pop, and Francie turned from the open space where the window had once been. She rolled her eyes and checked her phone. "Finally," she muttered, and she watched as a slit appeared in the air and tore open the middle of the great hall. Lottie spilled from the opening and landed with a soft thud. Maz followed a second later. Their landing was muffled by Lottie's body. "Hey," Lottie wheezed. "Get off." She lifted the slight creature easily and tossed them to the side. Maz groaned when they landed and rolled over, clutching their shoulder. "I think you dislocated something," they grimaced. "Oh, please," Lottie huffed. She got to her feet stiffly and stretched her arms overhead. "Ah, that's the stuff." She bent at the waist and grabbed her elbows. Her thick silver braid dangled between her overall-clad legs. Francie cleared her throat. Lottie snapped up and Maz jumped to their feet. "Who are you?" Lottie stepped forward, hands raised to fight. Francie laughed and shook her head. "Take it easy, Auntie," the girl crooned. "My name is Francie. I'm here to deliver a message." Maz moved to Lottie's side and wrapped an arm around her waist. "A message from who?" they asked quietly. Francie gave them a small, sympathetic smile. "You know the answer already. The only one who isn't present. The one you expected to see here instead of me." Lottie and Maz shared a long glance. Francie watched them with an amused smile on her face. "Be warned, my friends," she said softly. She was smiling, but there was a hard edge to her voice. "I can hear what you're thinking." She laughed suddenly. "You should believe me, Auntie. Lottie. I am strong. My mother gave me everything she could." "Mother?" Maz asked. Lottie started laughing. She grabbed her stomach and dropped to her knees. She shook and the tears streamed from her eyes. "Of course," she stammered between painful, hiccuping bouts of laughter. "Of course. Only Mina would have a daughter and not tell anyone." Her laughter slowed and the light faded from her eyes as the realization dawned on her. Looking over at Maz, she saw her friend had already figured it out. "She's gone?" Maz nodded grimly. Francie stood with her arms crossed and drummed her nails on her arm. It's incredibly sad, of course, but she knew what was coming. She made her choice. Francie leveled her gaze on each of them in turn. "You all did." She turned abruptly and moved away, beckoning for them to follow. "The time has come. This way. My mother left special instructions for you in the library. Let's move. You're running out of time." Lottie glanced at Maz. They shrugged and held out their hand to help Lottie stand. They avoided looking at each other again. The weight of the truth bore down on them as they hurried after Francie. Manx moved smoothly through the gym like a snake. He inspected the battered equipment and the worn, dingy flooring. He shoved his gloved hands into the pockets of his damp-stained lab coat as he circled the room. He finished his circuit and stopped in front of Kiki. "Hello, Kiki. It's been a long time." Kiki cringed at the slippery sound of his voice. It made the markings on her skin turn cold and tingle in a dangerous way. She hadn't felt it for almost 20 years. Manx sighed and waved a gloved hand at Ke. "Tie her up. To the chair." He snapped his gloved fingers and Ke and Kiki winced. Ke sprung into action and grabbed Kiki roughly. He tied her tightly to a chair from the office. His face was pained as he worked. He didn't want to do it. They were marked. For life. She had made a choice, and it bought them some time. 20 years of happiness. 20 years of peace. Kiki didn't fight him. Manx had less of a hold on her, but she knew it would be foolish to waste her energy. Her time would come. A soft sound drew Kiki's attention, distracting her from the cables biting into her skin. A choked, manic giggling was growing rapidly in volume. Gemma was racked with a powerful fit of giggles. Her face had turned a deep magenta, and she was gasping for air. "You're all fools," she laughed. "You don't understand what's happening. She's here. It has begun." Her voice grew to a high shriek, and Ke covered his ears with his meaty hands. Kiki thrashed in her chair against the sound. It sliced right through her. There was a sudden, deafening boom of thunder. The room plunged into darkness, but beyond the windows the world was filled with a brilliant golden light. There was an orangey-red tinge to it, which made the trees lining the streets appear to be on fire. Gemma's laughing was manageable now. She chuckled softly to herself. Her head swung back and forth. "She's coming," she said in a high sing-song voice. "And she is mad." She stretched the last word out. Another clap of thunder plunged the world into darkness. There was a strong smell of smoke. The dingy overhead lights flickered back on. Kiki was still in her place. Ke was cowering behind the front desk. Manx was immobile. The look on his face was unmistakable. He was terrified. Smoke was pouring into the front door of the gym. It formed a swirling column of raging wind, smoke, and something that glittered like stars. The smoke swirled faster and faster. The sound grew to a deafening roar. It reached a peak, and with a pop, it exploded out into the room, knocking Manx to his knees. As the smoke cleared, 3 figures appeared. Kiki gasped. "Kevo?" she said softly. "Oh no, son. No." Kevo looked nervous and glanced at Harper. Kiki's heart sank. She sat up a little taller in her chair and lifted her chin. "Hello, Thea." The thin, chilly woman sauntered forward with a smirk on her face. "No formalities, Keeks. Am I not still your queen?" "You know you're not." Kiki knew it was useless to pretend. She waited patiently for Thea's response. Manx was transfixed on the queen as well. Only Ke moved. He crept through the shadows along the edge of the room toward Gemma. Her eyes grew wide when she saw him. She shook her head violently, but he waved away her concern. Thea slapped Kiki as hard as she could. She was a small woman, but her power was unparalleled. Kiki felt her jaw dislocate, and the pain was surprising. It exploded in a burst of stars in front of her eyes as her head snapped around. Thea took a moment and shook out her hand. She stretched her fingers and smiled. Then she brought the back of her hand across Kiki's other cheek, and Kiki's nose burst in a spray of red and painted the floor with blood. A few droplets got on Thea's shoes, and she furrowed her brow. The droplets bounced back off the spotless surface and joined the rest on the dirty rubber floor. Ke had reached Gemma and unlocked her chains. He motioned for her to keep quiet and follow him. They crept carefully toward the door. Harper saw them. She tugged gently on Kevo's shirt, and he glanced over as well. He locked eyes with his father, and slowly, he nodded. Thea stood close to Kiki with her hands on her hips. The woman's broken face was swelling and turning a nauseating mix of purple, green, and yellow. "You know why I'm here. It's time. You made your choice, and now it's time to pay. I hope it was worth it." She took Kiki's face in her hands and held it gently. She kissed the woman's swollen lips and touched her forehead to Kiki's. "You know I could have helped you, Kiki. I was learning the magic to free you. All of you. I wanted to save the marked ones." Kiki squirmed a little as Thea's grip tightened. "I know why you chose the way you did. And I know you understand now that you chose wrong." She dug her nails into Kiki's face, and the woman tried to scream through her swollen lips. "It's hard to live with regrets. Luckily, you won't have to." She closed her eyes, and there was a burst of bright light between them. In that moment, Kevo shoved Harper toward his father. She stumbled, and Kes scooped her up. He threw her over one shoulder and Gemma over the other, and ran out of the gym. Kevo moved to attack Thea. He hoped somehow to save his mother. She wasn't a good one, but she was his. He was thwarted by Manx, who broke from his trance and knocked the boy to the ground. "Control yourself," he hissed into Kevo's ear, "if you want to live." The golden light grew red and murky. It faded away, swirling around the floor briefly before sliding out the door. Thea released Kiki's face, and the woman's head dropped lifelessly to her chest and stayed there. Kevo felt a pressure in his chest, a dark, throbbing pain deep in his heart. Manx patted his arm uncomfortably. His motions were stiff and meaningless. He got to his feet as Thea turned to face them. "Hello, dear," he said placidly. "Don't give me that," she snapped. "I know you helped them." Manx shook his head and looked sad. "Never, my love. I've been trying all this time to find a way to bring you back. And yet you couldn't figure it out." She sauntered over to him and placed a hand on his chest. "I've missed you, you fool." She smiled and kissed him, long and slow. Manx melted to the floor as she released him and stepped away. Thea turned to Kevo. "Where's Harper?" Her eyes flashed, and Kevo felt that stab of deep pain in his heart again. He stammered. My dad, took her." Thea glanced at Manx, and a slow smile spread across her face. "Oh, good," she grinned. "I was hoping someone would make it interesting. Let's go have some fun." And that, book lovers, is the end of Chapter 13 of Heart of the Storm. I hope you are still enjoying my weekly writing project. I definitely still am. Remember, you can listen to more of my writing on Sundays with Storytime with M, where I am sharing my book Feelers, a chapter or two a week. Thank you so much for listening, and until next time, keep reading.